Hi, this is video 3 of my little series on Broderie Anglaise made using polymer stamps to create the design. In this video we're actually going to do some embroidery, so I will show you how to work some scallops and work different types of basic eyelets. So let's get started. So I'm going to try with a cotton broder thread, and as you can see it's got a nice sort of tight twist to it. I'm going to work the scallops first, and I'm going to start off by just simply stitching through and leaving a bit of a tail. And now I'm going to follow the line in a running stitch. Now this will get really boring, so I'm not going to do the whole length. What I would normally do is work all the way along. I want to give you an indication of what's the different stitches that I'm going to use on this particular one. Notice my thread is at the front. The reason that that tail is at the front is so that I can manage it better, because of course this is a lace. You do actually want the back to be quite neat. Fortunately, the stitches that you use are ones that can be created quite neatly. Now, as I said, I would go the whole length and then I would come back along the top part of the scallop and again repeat with a running stitch. And if I wanted this scallop to be more padded, then I would add another running stitch down the center of it. Now I'm going to just work blanket stitches. Now you could work them sort of curving like that, but really what you should do is you should try to work them running with the grain of the fabric itself. Now I'm going to do this so that I can catch that thread, and I'm going to catch it in the first instance by actually stitching through it, and then I'm going to come down, tuck the thread behind the needle, and there's my first blanket stitch. I'm going to carry on like this with each one. I'm just going to pop that thread in there so that I can just catch it one more time. My fingers there just so that I made sure that I caught that. And then I'm going to just snip that. Snip the tail so that it's out of my way. There we go. And then I can continue to work the blanket stitch. Now try to have your, when you've stamped, really it's the same as if you're stamping or marking any embroidery, to have that stitch on the outer edge of your marking, okay? That way you cover it up. And you can cover it up quite well doing it that way. I don't know if you can see that very well. I'll try to get it so that it focuses. So I'll quickly finish off this scallop so that I can show you an eyelet. Now, normally, of course, you would work as far as you possibly can. I'm going to show you how to finish, because obviously you will ultimately run out of thread. So take your needle to the back, and just go underneath some of the threads. Then what I tend to do is come back underneath, but I try to split some threads or weave through a bit, because obviously I don't want that to come out, and there's nothing wrong with doing it a couple of times if you need to. Then you can snip that quite close. And there's your first scallop. Now eyelets are worked really, they're much simpler than a lot of people think that they are. What you need to do with an eyelet, I'll start with a small one, is again bring your thread in at the front of the fabric and leave a small tail. Work a running stitch around the circle that's going to be your eyelet. So that can pretty much be on the line that you've stamped or marked. Because obviously this doesn't have to have been stamped. You know, you could draw this design in. The principle is the same. Now when you get to the beginning, first thing to do is to like catch that thread with the needle so that you come up just to the side of it. Now some of the old books say to then take that back to the back of the fabric, which I've never really successfully managed to do. Maybe if I left a very long tail, that would be fine. The next thing you have to do is pierce your hole. Okay, now if you have a tapered awl, then that's great because you can pierce it and you can keep going to make a larger hole if you want one. So for instance, this circle is a larger hole than that circle. If you don't, just find yourself a series of sticks. So you can start out with a small stick and pierce your hole, and then you can go up to a larger stick if you want your hole to be larger. Okay, and what you're doing is you're spreading out the weave of the fabric. So it doesn't matter whether it's a tight fabric or if it's a loose fabric. You need to create the eyelet itself. Now what I tend to do is I tend to start so that I can, if I can, I'm covering over that right at the beginning, the tail of. So you have your thread coming out on the surface of the embroidery, and you go through the hole that you've just pierced and you come out at the edge, and then you basically just do this all of the way around the circle. If you have a very tight fabric, a tightly woven fabric, then as you're working these stitches, you may need to pull in quite a bit to keep your hole the size that you want it to be. I'll stick my finger there so that you can see through. Otherwise, just keep every once in a while with your awl if it seems to be closing up. Now I have managed to cover over the beginning of that tail, so I'm just going to snip that off so it doesn't irritate me, and then carry on with just simple straight stitches going down through the hole that you've created and then coming up at the other side of the running stitch. I think one of the hardest things that people have with eyelets is that usually it's that it closes up, that you've measured out and you've said, oh, I want to have this eyelet this big, but then as you're working, it's closing up. And that's more usual because that you're not pulling on your fibers to keep them apart. Now, of course, this particular weave is quite delicate, so I need to be a little bit more careful than I would with a denser fabric. However, you can still see that the hole is forming, and if I want to just make sure it stays a little bit larger, just use my awl again, or stiletto, or lots of different names for it. Now, when you've sort of come full circle, you've got two choices really when you're doing the little decorative elements, is that you can work each one individually. So therefore finishing it off. But of course you've got a lot of ends if you do that that could go wrong, and weaknesses, as it were, in the embroidery that you don't really want to sort of go. So what I like to do, I take the last stitch through. Now you don't want that hanging off, so don't go over across to a motif that goes over the hole, because that's just going to ruin your eyelet. So take it underneath, and then you can go straight to your next motif. A little line underneath joining them honestly isn't going to be a problem. So to do an oval, you have a few choices with an oval. You can cut, you can work an eyelet just in one section of an oval, which is what I'm going to do on this. So I'm going to outline just as I did with the circle. Okay, so it's all outlined. I'm going to pierce at one end of the oval. Which end is entirely up to you, where you want your actual pattern of holes. And now I'm going to work longer stitches at one end of the oval to create a shape with a dot just at one end. Now carry on with the rest of the stitches, wrapping around in exactly the same way as the circular eyelet. And of course, you also have the option that with something like this, you could do a portion of these just completely satin stitched with no holes at all. And again, through to the other side. And weave through. And then I'll just snip that so that you can see from the front. There's the start of the embroidery. So I think that that's going to look quite nice as a lace. And I will carry on and then come back and show you how to trim and finish off. Thanks very much for watching. We've got one more video in this little series coming up. Do please hit subscribe and click that bell icon to be notified when I next upload a video. Take care. Bye-bye.